May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Nabiah Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrael Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. I have the privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl now entering the sanctuary. I now present one of the sons of Yisrayl, Yedidiah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, you may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. So today I'm going to be talking about how Yahshua did not earn his position because of the way he died. He earned his position because of the way he lived. So think about this. In the House of Yahweh, we learn to live righteously and by the 613 laws of peace. And by our overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins, the one that Yahweh has sent in these last days, he's teaching us the right way to live so we can make it into Yahweh's kingdom. But in the world, their leader is Pope Francis, and he's teaching them against the 613 laws. And he's teaching them to break the 10 commandments. He's teaching them to war and fight against each other. So if you can turn over to Genesis 4, and it's 4:6, and it's on page 3. Four, 6 through 7, and it says, So Yahweh said to Cain, Why are you angry? Why are you downcast? If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do righteousness, sin is crouching at your door. So you can't do evil and say, oh, I'm going to make it into Yahweh's kingdom, and not practice righteousness. No, you have to practice righteousness like Yahshua Messiah practiced righteousness. And if you can turn over to Luke 2, verse 47, and it's on page 783. Luke 2:47, and it says, And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding. When they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, Son, why have you done this to us? Behold, your father and I search for you in great distress. He said to them, Why is it that you search for me? Do you not know that I must be about my Father's business? So you see, Yahshua was focused on Yahweh's laws and keeping Yahweh's laws. Yahshua was a servant to others, and Yahshua wanted to practice righteousness, and that's exactly what he did. Yahshua walked in the ways of Yahweh. All right, and if you can turn over to Yochanan 13, verse 12, and it's on page 831. And it's Yochanan 13, 12 through 13. And it says, we are to follow Yahshua's example. So Yahshua is our example, and Yahshua is the righteous example that we should follow. All right, and it says, after he had washed their feet, he put his talit back on and sat down again. Then he said to them, Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and leader, and rightfully so I am. So Yahshua was the teacher of righteousness. He was a leader of righteousness in his time, and he was also a servant of righteousness. And this is how we need to be. We need to be just like Yahshua. We need to follow the example of Yahshua and follow the example of Yisrayl Hawkins. And the Yisrayl Hawkins says, I have a quote from the Yisrayl Hawkins says, and it says, the 12th book of Israel, part 1, chapter 15, verse 22, it says, it's an act of kindness that got to be established in the heart by practicing what he did. Yahshua practiced the laws of Yahweh And that's the reason the Apostle Yochanan said, don't be deceived. He who practices righteousness and righteousness. He who practices righteousness is righteous. So that's Romans 6:16 again. So Yahshua practiced righteousness. He practiced what he was taught by his father and mother. And it says, he who practices righteousness is righteous. And of course, this is what Yahshua lived. He was taught righteousness, and when Yahshua was taught righteousness, he lived it. He lived what he was taught. And it says he was taught righteousness, and then he went about practicing righteousness for his years up until he was killed. So, if you see, we have banners hanging up. It says, learn what to teach, then teach what you learn. And that's what Yahshua did. He learned righteousness, and then he practiced righteousness. And when he practiced it, he taught it as well. So, if you can turn over to Romans 6:16, it's on page 878. Romans 6:16, page 878. And it says, do you not know, to whom you yield yourself as servants to obey, his servants you are, whom you obey, whether of sin, which leads to death, or obedience, which leads to righteousness. And Yahshua, he walked in righteousness. All his life, he walked in righteousness, and he obeyed Yahweh. And he was a servant to Yahweh, and Yahshua was a servant to us also. So when we serve Yahweh by keeping his laws, by practicing righteousness, we serve each other. All right, so it says, it says, so you are servants to whom you obey. So let's not be servants to Satan, let's be servants to Yahweh. And Yahshua filled his mind with righteousness. And in this generation, we have the books of Yisrayl, the Peaceful Solutions, and all the other books that has been brought out. And we can read those and we can fill our mind with righteousness. We should keep these things on the forefront of our mind. And Yahshua also kept the 10 Commandments, which Pope Francis and all the other popes have been teaching the world not to keep. But Yisrael Hawkins he keeps teaching the 10 Commandments to us. And this is a new prophetic word magazine, and it's July 26, and it has the 10 Commandments. And it says, you shall not have hindered gods, you shall not make for yourself any carved images, you shall not take the name of Yahweh, your heavenly Father, and bring it to nothing. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and mother. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false testimony, and you shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. And these 10 Commandments, this is what Yahshua kept, and this is what Yahshua lived by. This is what we need to live by. And that is how Yahshua became, he earned the power to conquer problems. Yahshua earned the power to conquer problems by living righteously, by living by the 613 laws which Yahweh has commanded us to keep. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, son of Yisrayl, Yeshaya Hawkins.
And now, if you all remain standing, it's my honor and privilege to present to you son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yeshrin.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. My title is, Who are the two witnesses? Well, there's two witnesses of each. we have Jacob and Yisrayl for Yahweh's two witnesses. And we have Pope Benedict and Pope Francis for Satan's witnesses. In these last days, there are two witnesses sent by Yahweh through prophecy to bring the truth to the world and a warning or what will take place because of sin. Their names are found in Isaiah 44 verse 1 through 2, 7 through 8. Let's read. Isaiah 44 verse 1. Yet now hear, O Jacob, my servant, and Yisrayl, whom I have chosen. This is what Yahweh says, who made you and formed you from the womb, who will help you. Do not be afraid, Jacob, my servant, and Yeshua, beloved Yisrayl, who I have appointed, and who, as I will foretell, and sit in it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people and the things which are coming and will come, let them foretell them. Do not fear nor be afraid. Have I not told you from that time that and have declared you are my witness? Is there a source of power except me? Truly there is no other rock, I know not one. Satan also has two witnesses, or false prophets. One is called Pope Francis, and one is called Pope Benedict XVI. They are on 7 hills of Rome, teaching against all righteousness and leading this world to nuclear destruction. 25 years ago, one of Yahweh's witnesses, our beloved overseer Yisrayl Hawkins, wrote this book called The Two Witnesses. And I'd like to share with you the back of the cover. It says, not only is the truth concerning the two witnesses has never been understood among the Christian, nor the Sabbath-keeping world. Not only is Revelation chapter 11 the most familiar chapter concerning the two witnesses, this was the only chapter in the entire Bible that the religious world ever associated with these two men. I have heard many sermons and read many articles concerning the two witnesses, and Revelation chapter 11 was the only reference which was used. Another scripture about the two witnesses, Zechariah 4 verse 11 through 12 and 14. Then I answered and said to him, what are these two olive trees upon the right side of the lampstand and upon the left side of it? Then I spoke to him again and said to him, what are these two olive branches which through the golden pipes empty the golden oil through them? Then he said, these are two anointed ones who stand for the supreme ruler of the whole earth. Yahweh shows one of the two witnesses would be given to the curse or death. Isaiah 43, if you could turn over to Isaiah 43 verse 28. Therefore I will dissolve the Levitical priesthood and give Jacob to the curse and Yisrayl to reproaches. The other witness would be given to reproach and would be used by Yahweh to fully make known Yahweh's name, laws, and prophecies. His name is Yisrayl. Isaiah 49 verse 1 through 3. For my final scripture, if you could turn over to Isaiah 49 verse 1 through 3. And he said to listen, O Israel's countries, to me. Listen, you people from afar. Yahweh has called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother. He has made mention of my name, and he has made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand he has hidden me, and made a polished shaft in his quiver. He has hidden me. And he said to me, you are my servant, O Yisrayl, through whom I will be glorified. For my final scripture, please turn to Revelations 18, verse 1 to 4. And after these things I saw another mallet come down from heaven having great authority, and the earth was enlightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of demons, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, so that you do not partake in her sins, and so that you do not receive of her plagues. For my conclusion, come out of Babylon, come to Yahweh's house, and join Yahweh's last days witness in getting this message out to this dying world. And if you all please stand, I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. My title today is The Nuclear Burning. Today we see world leaders threatening to unleash nuclear weapons against each other. You hear men like John Kerry, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un saying, in effect, we have nukes and we're going to use them. And as former U.S. Senator Rick Santorum said, we have entered World War III. He said, World War III has begun. I don't agree with it, Santorum said. And also, on Wednesday, Pope Francis said the world is at war following the wave of Europe attacks. He says, a stinging of terror attacks in Europe, including the brutal murder of a French priest, is proof that the world is at war, Pope Francis has said. Matthew 24 speaks about the last generation. Please turn to Matthew 24, verse 7. On page 752. It says, for nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences, disease epidemics and earthquakes in place after place. Notice how we see nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. This is the nations lining up and preparing for nuclear war. Now turn to Revelations 11, verse 18 on page 978. It says, and nations were angry, and your judgment is come. This is Yahweh's prophesied judgment for all the nations that went the way of Cain. Please turn to Genesis 4, verse 14 on page 3. It says, surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall not be seen by your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, for there shall be continual war, vengeance, and retaliation. Please also turn to Isaiah 1 on page 531. Isaiah 1. And let's look at verse 19. If you will be willing and obedient, you will eat the fruit of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you will be devoured by the sword, for the mouth of Yahweh has spoken it. This sword is nuclear war. The day of destruction is described by the prophet Zephaniah. Please turn to Zephaniah 1, verse 14, on page 712. It says, "The great day of Yahweh is near. It's near, hastening quickly. The sound of the day of Yahweh is bitter. The mighty men will cry there. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wastiness, a day of desolation, a day of darkness, a day and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. A day of the trumpet, shofar blast, and battle alarm against the fortified cities and against the high towers." This is exactly what Yeshua Messiah described in Matthew 24, verse 29 on page 753. "Immediately but after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give her light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken." Mankind has been given 6,000 years to go their own way to prove to them what their way brings. In these 6,000 years, the only thing mankind could come up with could bring forth was war and more war. With the increase of knowledge came the war that could destroy all life, nuclear war. The Apostle Kepha said that the great day of Yahweh, spoken of by Zephaniah, will come as a thief in the night upon the world. Turn to 2 Kepha 3 on page 963. 2 Kepha 3 and verse 10. "But the day of Yahweh will come as a thief in the night, and the heavens will pass away with great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up." This nuclear burning will come as a thief in the night upon the world, so we must be prepared and spiritually ready because we've been called out of the world. Please look at verse 11. "Since all things will then be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and righteousness?" And verse 14, "Therefore, beloved, since you are looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found spotless, blameless, and at peace with him." Don't get caught up with the things Yeshua warned us about in the parable of the sower in Matthew 13. Read it later. But he's talking about the cares of this life and the deceitfulness of seeking riches. Now turn to Revelation 18. Revelations 18 and verse 17. For in 1 hour such great riches have come to nothing, and every sea captain and all the company and ships and the sailors who earned their money living from the sea stood afar off. Do y'all remember the interview with Dr. Theodore Postel, a former high-level Navy advisor? Well, in there, he was telling the newscaster that it only took 20 to 30 minutes to an hour and the world could be destroyed. Just proving the scripture right here. For in 1 hour the great riches have come to nothing. It only takes 30 minutes to an hour. In conclusion, I'd like to remind everyone that in these very last days, we have all types of distractions, but we must stay strong and practice righteousness at all times because Yahweh's kingdom is coming right after the nuclear discussion. Please turn for my closing scripture to Habakkuk 2, verse 3 on page 710. It says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, it will not lie. Though it seems slow, but wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not delay." And with that, if you'd all please stand. I'd like to turn the services over to the great Deacon Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'm going to be talking about the 10 kings will make war with the Lamb and bring the nuclear burning. And as soon as possible, if you can go to yahwehsbranch.com, they have an article on there, and it's the great, quote, holy, unquote, unrighteous alliance. These 10 will make war with the Lamb and bring the great burning. And it talks all about the 10 kings that you see in these, that you saw last week. Now that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now it all started, or it will all be in this generation that started with the increase in knowledge. If you turn over to Daniel 12. Daniel 12 verse 1, it says, "And at that time Micaiah will stand up, the great ruler who stands for the children of your people, and there will be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation to that time. And at that time your people will be delivered, everyone who will be found written in the book of life." And verse 4 says, "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book to the time of the end. Many will run to and fro, and knowledge will be increased." Alright, so this generation started in 1934, and that's when the computer was invented, the nuclear bomb, it was patented in 1934. The two witnesses were born, or the last witness was born in 1934. If it started with these two witnesses also. If you turn to Isaiah 44, as we heard earlier, Isaiah 44, it's on page 558. It says, verse 1, "Yet now hear, O Jacob my servant, and Yisrayl whom I have chosen." Alright, those there are the two witnesses. Verse 2, "This is what Yahweh says, who made you and formed you from the womb, who will help you. Do not be afraid, Jacob my servant, and Yeshurun, beloved Yisrael, whom I have appointed." Verse 8 says, "Do not fear, nor be afraid. Have I not told you from that time, and have declared, you are my witnesses? Is there a source of power except me? Truly there is no other rock, I know not one." Alright, so you could tell that these are the last days, or you could tell that this is the last generation by prophecy. If you turn over to 2 Timothy 3, he also shows us that we are in this last generation. 2 Timothy 3, verse 1 through 9, it says, it's on page 938, "Know this also, that in the last days perilous times will come." And it gives you a bunch of things that will occur in these last days, or will show you that we're in the last days. Also in Matthew 24 verse 7 says, "For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and pestilences, disease epidemics, and earthquakes in place after place." And verse 12, "And because iniquity, the breaking of Yahweh's law will abound, the love of the many will grow cold." And verse 14, "And this message of the kingdom will be preached to all the world by the one who bears witness to all nations, and then the end will come." Alright, so prophecy shows that there will be 10 kings, and these 10 kings came from the 12 tribes. And they had a form of holiness, as you could see with the American Indians. When they fled to the United States, they took with them a form of holiness. And these these 12 tribes, they all had this form of holiness. But before they called themselves Catholics, they were the Pharisees, the Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, which destroyed the temple. If you turn over to Micaiah 3, it's on page 705. Verse 1 through 2 says, "Then I said, Hear now, O heads of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know justice, you who hate righteousness and love evil, to strip off the skin from my people and the meat from their bones?" If you look down to verse 9, it says, "Hear now, O heads of the house of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel, who abhor justice and pervert all equity, who build up Zion with blood and Jerusalem with iniquity. Her heads judge for reward, and her priests teach, give instruction in the law for pay, and her prophets divine for money. Yet they lean upon Yahweh and say, Is not Yahweh among us? No evil can come upon us. Therefore, because of you, Zion will be plowed like a field, Jerusalem will become heaps of rubble, and the mountain of the house of Yahweh like the high places of a forest." So these are the same ones who destroyed the temple, and they turned from Yahweh and started their own ways. Now these 10 kings that we heard about last week, Pastor was waiting for them, and if you remember, he wrote about them in the Mark of the Beast and these different books. And Pastor was waiting on them to come out, and here they are. They popped up out of nowhere, and as you can see here, remember, this is a prophecy being fulfilled. Right here you can see there's 10 kings there. Alright? If you turn over to Daniel 7, verse 7, it says, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth, it devoured and broke in pieces, then trampled the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns." If you go over to verse 23, this is what he said: "The fourth beast will be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which will be different from all other kingdoms, and will devour the whole earth, and will tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that will arise, and another will rise after them, and he will be different from the first ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. And he will speak great words against Yahweh, and will wear out, mentally attack, to cause to fall away the saints of Yahweh, and think to change times, Yahweh's feast days and laws, and they will be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time." Alright, so these are the 10 kings, and I'm going to show you them one by one so that you could learn a little bit about them. The first one here is Bartholomew the First of Constantinople, as you can see there. He is he's the 270th and current Archbishop of Constantinople and ecumenical patriarch since the 2nd of November in 1991. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, he is regarded as the first among equals. Right there. He's the first among equals, and as the spiritual leader of Constantinople's Patriarchs Orthodox Christians. Alright? It says he has also gained a reputation as a prominent environmentalist, putting the support of the Patriarch behind various international environmental causes. This has earned him the nicknames of the Green Patriarch and the Green Pope. And in 2002, he was honored with the Sophie Prize. Alright, so you can see how the plans for the Vatican, they were going to do something with the environment, and that's what they're trying to start up. And you can see how this patriarch here, or one of these kings, are with the Pope on that. It says he attended the papal inauguration of Pope Francis on March 19, 2013, paving the way for better Catholic-Orthodox relations. It was the first time that the spiritual head of Eastern Orthodox Christians had attended a papal inauguration since the Great Schism of 1054. And you can see here that he met with Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, and also he met with the Pope, Pope Francis. And this is at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Alright. Also here, Patriarch Bartholomew I prays for full union between Catholic Orthodox churches. Alright, and it has a picture, and if you notice that pole that they're holding, if you notice, you see the two serpents there, the two snakes. Alright, it says here in the article, directed towards Pope Francis, the speech. No, it says, in a prayer gathering, the second day of Pope Francis's visit to Turkey, Patriarch Bartholomew I welcomed him with joy, saying in his presence is a symbolic bridging of the East and West. So you can see there that they're trying to pull these churches together. It says, directed towards Pope Francis, the speech took place during an ecumenical prayer gathering held at the Orthodox Cathedral of St. George in Istanbul, after which the Pope and the Patriarch held a private meeting. Alright, and also he denies being a Freemason. It says the ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople has denied rumors that Patriarch Bartholomew I of Constantinople holds a primacy of honor in Eastern Orthodoxy, is a Freemason. It says some Orthodox who are critical of the Patriarch's participation in ecumenical dialogue have long accused Patriarch Bartholomew I and his predecessors of being Freemasons. The next one that we have, the next king, is Anastasios. He's from the Church of Albania. It says he is the current head of Orthodox Church, the Orthodox Autocephalous Church of Albania. He speaks Greek, Albanian, and some English. His work included charity in Africa in his early years prior to becoming the Archbishop of Albania. Alright, the next one you have is Patriarch Theodore II of Alexandria. Alright, now a lot of these people, there's not a lot of things on them, but as you remember, they're the 10 kings that are spoken of in prophecy. Next one is, he's the Archbishop, and his name is Rastilov of Czechlands and Slovakia. Alright, then you have Archbishop Chrysostomus II of Cyprus. Alright, the one after that is Archbishop Hieronymus of the Athens and all Greece. The next one is the Patriarch Theophilus III of Jerusalem. And then Sawa, Metropolitan Sawa of Warsaw and all Poland. The one after that is Patriarch Daniel of Romania. And he also, it says, although appreciated for his intellectual skills and diplomacy, Daniel is regarded as a renovationalist, an iron-handed patriarch by traditionalists and various radicals who accuse him of being a Freemason and supporting economism, considered a heresy of our times, and of planning to forcibly unite the Romanian Orthodox Church with the Roman Catholic Church, although he refuted the first allegation in a public statement. Alright, so he also is accused of being a Freemason. The next one is this patriarch. His name is kind of hard, but he's of Siberia and Serbia. And you can see here, these are the ones that these four dropped out from the actual meeting. And it was the one over Bulgaria, Syria, Georgia, and Russia. Alright? So those there are the 10 kings. And in the newsletter there that was on Yahweh's branch, it had an article, and it says the Orthodox Church has declared its unity during June 20th through 16 Pan-Orthodox Council. So they all met at this one place, and they talked about being in unity. It says the Orthodox Church has declared, I don't know if you can see that well. The Orthodox Church has declared its unity in the message of the Pan-Orthodox Council, which took place in Crete on June 20 through the 26th. The key priority of the council was to proclaim the unity of the Orthodox Church. The Orthodox Autocephalous churches do not constitute a federation of churches, but the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, the message reads. It says the council was convened after over 50 years of preparation. Of the 14 national Orthodox churches, 4 did not attend the event. So that makes your 10 kings. If you turn over to Revelation 17, it's on page 982. Verse 13 says, "These have one purpose, and they will give their power and authority to the beast." Verse 17, "But Yahweh has put in their hearts to perform His will and to agree, so they will agree and give their kingdom to the beast until the words, prophecies of Yahweh will be fulfilled." Alright, so they're giving their power to the beast. And remember, if you go to Yahweh'sBranch.com, you can read all about them in that article. Alright, so remember these things because it is fulfilling the prophecies. And with that, if everyone will please stand, I'll turn over to the great Deacon Yaakov. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'd like to continue with the subject on the 10 kings. Now remember, this was prophesied of throughout the Book of Yahweh, throughout the Holy Scriptures. But today we're just going to focus on Daniel and Revelation. Now let's go to Revelation 17. Revelation 17, found on page 982. And we'll start on verse 3. It says, "So he carried me away in the Spirit into the midst of God worshippers of Elohim. And I saw a woman sitting on the scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns." Now, this woman is the Vatican, or the Catholic Church, the city there. As you see in verse 18, go down to verse 18, it says, "And the woman whom you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." And we know right now the Catholic Church is reigning over all the kings of the earth. Now let's go to verse 7. It says, "And the Malach said to me, Why are you astonished? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." Then also go to verse 12. It says, "And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings." Alright, this is explaining who the 10 horns are. It says, "Which you saw are 10 kings, which as yet have not received the kingdom, but receive authority as kings 1 hour with the beast." Get that 1 hour there. And then verse 13, it says, "These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast." Now if you look at the side note there for the word power, it's right across on the side of the page, the side note. It's letter O, and it says strength, violence, and military. Now this is their power, the strength, violence, and military. And then the authority there is delegated influence, their influence. Alright, let's also look at verse 14. It says, "These will make war with the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them." Alright, now the Lamb is Yeshua, but it's talking about they will make war with the house of Yahweh, because Yeshua is over the house of Yahweh. It says, "For he is the ruler of rulers and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called and chosen and faithful." Now let's also look at verse 16. It says, "And the 10 horns which you saw upon the beast, these will hate the whore, and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh, and burn her with fire." Alright, so you see here, these 10 kings will make war. Now, remember the 10 kings, or the 10 horns, are religious powers. Alright, these are the 10 kings. Now let's go to Revelation 17:12. Let's go back to verse 12. It says, "And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which as yet have not received the kingdom, but receive authority as kings 1 hour with the beast." Notice that 1 hour. Now look at Revelation 18 verse 10. It's on the same page, Revelation 18 verse 10. It says, "Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come." Also, Revelation 18 verse 17, it says, "For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing, and every sea captain and all the company in ships, the sailors and all who earned their living from the sea, stood afar off." And then also, verse 19, it says, "And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, in which all who had ships in the sea were made rich through her wealth, for in 1 hour she is made desolate." So you see this 1 hour here, and we know the wars will come in 1 hour. Can I get my first video number 1?
Now, Ted, tell me something. Explain to an amateur, to me, how does one launch a nuclear weapon? Is it as easy as pressing a button? How long does it take for a nuclear missile to reach its target?
Well, typically what the United States and Russia have are several kinds of what are called ballistic missiles. They, in the case of both Russia and the United States, we have land-based ballistic missiles, which are in fortified underground missile silos so that they're protected to some extent from nuclear attack, or on submarines in the holds of submarines. And the ballistic missile would be could be fired in basically within 50 or 60 seconds, more or less, of an alert being given to the operators. The warning could take minutes to occur. That is, the Russian government or the American government could believe that an attack is underway. They could assess the situation and then collect information and then make a decision whether or not to launch. That could take 10 or 15 minutes. In the case of actually launching the rocket, that would take 40, 50, 60 seconds, maybe more, again, more or less, depending on procedures, which are easily changed. The rocket would then ignite. It would fly out of its silo or its launch hole in the submarine. It would typically undergo powered flight for about between 150 and 300 seconds, depending on whether or not the rocket is what's called a solid propellant or a liquid propellant. So in one case, 5 minutes, the other case, maybe 2.5 minutes. And then it would release warheads. The warheads would float in the near vacuum of space under the influence of gravity and momentum. And in about 20 to 25 or 28 minutes would arrive at their targets, re-enter the atmosphere, and explode. So the world could be basically finished off in anywhere from a half hour to an hour, anywhere from a half hour to an hour, anywhere from a half hour to an hour upon the arrival of these warheads. People who think about these things generally expect, nobody really knows what to expect, but if you had a massive exchange, most nuclear warheads would be delivered in a very short time, probably within a half hour or an hour interval.
Now, the bombs U.S. and Russia have in their arsenal, the bombs that Russia and U.S. have in their arsenal right now, they're 100 times more powerful than the ones that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. How devastating would the aftermath of a nuclear explosion be today?
Yeah, they're more than hundreds of times. They're more than hundreds of times. They're more than hundreds of times more powerful.
You can remain seated. So you see that the nuclear expert was telling the House of Yahweh that the nuclear war will start and be in 1 hour. All right. Now this will be done in and around the great river Euphrates. Let's turn to Revelation 9. Revelation 9. That's found on page 977. Revelation 9, and we'll look at verse 14. It says, saying to the sixth Malach, which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels who are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour. Get that? An hour and a day and a moon, month and a year, in order to slay the third part of men. Now, I want you to look at this map here. You can see It starts down here with Egypt, right here, Egypt. Then you have Israel, then you have this Cyprus, then Turkey, Greece, Albania, Serbia, Romania, the Czech Republic, and then Poland. Now these are all around the great river Euphrates. Alright? The river Euphrates is down here. It starts in Turkey and it goes down towards here. So all of these are in and around the great river Euphrates. Alright? And those are where the 10 kings are located. In and around the great river Euphrates. Now, I want to remind you, we don't have much time. The only hope that we have is if you turn to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 6 and verse 17, found on page 904. That's 2 Corinthians 6 verse 17. It says, "Therefore come out from among them and be separate, says Yahweh. Do not touch the unclean thing, and I will receive you." And then also, for your second witness on that, go to Revelation 18. Revelation 18 and verse 4. Revelation 18 verse 4, found on page 982. It says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you do not partake in her sins, and so you do not receive of her plagues." Alright? So your only hope is to come out of the world. Come out of the world, don't follow in her ways. If y'all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, son of Yisrayl, Deacon Daniel DePass.
Shalom, everyone. Y'all may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Such a privilege and high honor to come before the saints of Yahweh on this great and awesome Sabbath day. Will everybody be turning over to Amos 3 verse 7. And the title of my sermon today is Yahweh sent his witness Yisrayl and reestablished his house in these last days so that we can become teachers of true lasting peace forever. And the purpose of this message is to show that Yahweh's prophecies and his great plan can be trusted. Okay, let's look at Amos 3 verse 7 is on page 696, and it states, "Most assuredly, Yahweh's Father Yahweh will have no other work other than the work that he had prophesied in advance by his servants, the prophets." So you see here that there's no work of Yahweh without it being prophesied. It has to be prophesied first, including this one that we're in right here today. So the first part of my sermonette, I'll be talking about the reestablishment of the House of Yahweh. And we'll be looking at positive law number 21, reverence Yahweh in the House of Yahweh. And let's look at the scripture that goes along with it, Leviticus 19 verse 30, and this is on page 98. And it states, "You shall reverence me, keep my Sabbaths, and by keeping my Sabbaths at my sanctuary, I am Yahweh." So let's say we didn't know this is the house of Yahweh, and we didn't know that this is where we're teaching Yahweh's laws. Where am I supposed to find this house of Yahweh? Let's go over to some supporting scriptures for Leviticus 19. This is Deuteronomy 12 verse 5. And also, Matthew 6 verse 33 says the same thing. But Deuteronomy 12, around the same thing, but Deuteronomy 12 verse 5 on page 157, it states, "But you are to seek the habitation of your father, the house of Yahweh, the place which Yahweh your father shall choose out of all your tribes to establish his name, and there you must go." So we see that Yahweh commands us to seek his house. And that's the only way we can serve him and be a part of his kingdom. So let's look at, some of the prophecies concerning Yahweh's house of Yahweh original work in Abelin, Israel. We heard it before, the scripture, Micaiah 3 verse 1 and 2. And we're also going to look at verse 12. This is on page 705. And it states, Then I said, Hear now, O heads of Jacob, you rulers of the house of Israel, is it not for you to know justice? You who hate righteousness and love evil, who strip off the skin from my people and the meat from their bones. So this shows you that this is one family. This is Yahweh's family, the 12 tribes that he is working with here. And they built the house of Yahweh, and they also destroyed the house of Yahweh. We're going to see that here in verse 12. Therefore, because of you, not because of anybody else, Zion will be plowed like a field, Jerusalem will become heaps of rubble, and the mountain of the house of Yahweh like the high places of the forest. Let's also look at Yachanan Mark, verse 13. And Matthew 24 says about the same thing. Yachanan Mark in the first two verses of chapter 13, and it is on page 507. It states, As he was leaving the house of Yahweh, one of his disciples said to him, Teacher, what great dressed stones, what wonderful buildings. Yeshua answering said to him, You see all these great buildings? There will not be left one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. So Yeshua, reading the prophecies in Micaiah, understood that the house of Yahweh will be destroyed by, again, the same sons of Yisrael, the 12 tribes who rebelled against Yahweh and didn't keep his laws. Let's also look at Yachanan 4, chapter 4, verse 20 and 21. It is found on page 818, and it states on verse 20, Our fathers worshipped in this mountain. So this is the woman talking to Yeshua, if you remember that story. And she was talking about this, where they would worship, because she perceived Yeshua was a prophet or a man of Yahweh. But you, continuing, Yadayim say, in Jerusalem, this is the place where men ought to worship. In verse 21, Yeshua gives a clue here. Yeshua said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour comes when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. Let's also turn over to Zechariah 5, verse 10 through 11. So this also gives a clue where the house of Yahweh is going to be built and who is going to be building this house. It is on page 719. And starting off at verse 10, Zechariah 5, verse 10, it states, Then I said to the Malach who was speaking with me, Where are they? The two witnesses. Oh, wow, the two witnesses. Keep them in mind here. Going with the ephah. Verse 11, And he said to me, To build the house of Yahweh according to the standard of perfection, sent by Yahweh's laws, in a Babylonian Shalom, which has not yet existed. And Pastor has continued to show that this land wasn't established until these last days, which, around these last days, around recognized by the authorities and so forth, like around 1492. And it will be established at that time when the two witnesses are called out to do their work as the established place, the habitation of the house of Yahweh. So you see that the house of Yahweh was supposed to be built in these last days. It was supposed to be reestablished. And who was supposed to reestablish them? Let's go over again on the same page, 719, Zechariah 6, verse 11 to 13. So this shows that pastor will be working, or the two witnesses will be working with somebody here. And we're going to see he's the high priest of this work. Verse 11 says, Take silver and gold and make crowns, and set them upon the heads of Yeshua, son of Yazadek. And this Yazadek is Yahweh, and it means Yahweh who made righteousness and is righteous. And is a reference L. The high priest. So to reference, in more detail on how Yeshua is the high priest, Hebrews 10, verse 21 for your notes will show you a little bit more about how Yeshua is the high priest and the work that he's doing in these last days. So in verse 12, speak to him and say, Behold, the man whose name is the branch. He has a lot of names, and the scriptures calls him many different things, but he's doing a work here. For he will branch out from his place, and he will build the house of Yahweh. So this is the house of Yahweh we're going to come to in these last days. And yes, he will build the house of Yahweh and bear glory. So let's look at this. We see that the house of Yahweh is going to be built in these last days. We see that who is going to be building the house of Yahweh, the two witnesses. Particularly here, we're talking about we're going to be talking about Yisrayl, the witness Yisrayl. And let's also just keep in mind Isaiah 2 verse 2 and Micaiah 4 verse 1. But it has some very important points here that will give a further description of the house of Yahweh in these last days. Let's look at Isaiah 2 verse 2, and we're going to read to verse 4. It states, "And it will come to pass in the last days that the mountain promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations, and will be raised above all congregations, and all nations will eventually flow to it." And in verse 3, at the bottom of verse 3 in the Book of Yahweh, it states, "For the law will depart from Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem." In verse 4, at the bottom of that verse as well, it states, "Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war anymore," due to the teaching that will be coming from the house of Yahweh through this witness Yisrael. And as we can see here, he's going to be teaching peace. This is a very important clue as to what the house of Yahweh will be teaching and where it would be. So we covered where the house of Yahweh would be in these last days. We looked at a little bit of where the house of Yahweh was and who destroyed it. Right here, we can see this is the one of the prophetic words. I think this is where you put it, but I'll just show it here. This is February 2016. It's in multiple prophetic words, but it shows you the history of Titus and who destroyed the temple in 70 AD. And it showed you the war that took place and how they took all of the articles and took it to Rome. So the house of Yahweh is not there anymore. The house of Yahweh is here. And we also read in Isaiah 2 verse 2 talks about the chief of the nations. This is the chief of the nations, the United States. So let's look at the other law, the law that talks about the 1 cent. Law number 172, it states, "Listen and obey Yahweh's anointed servant, the overseer of the house of Yahweh." And it gives a scripture, Deuteronomy 18 verse 15 to 19. We're going to be reading verses 15 and 18. And it is on page 162. It states, "Yahweh your father will raise up for you a prophet like me from the midst of your own brothers. Him you must listen to." And this is verse 18. "I will raise up for you for them a prophet like you from your brothers, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he will tell them everything I command them." Let's also look at what the Savior said in Yochanan 6 verse 28 to 29. And it is found on page 821, reading in verse 28. "And then they said to him, 'What must we do that we might work the works of Yahweh?' And this is verse 29. "Yeshua answered and said to them, 'This is the work of Yahweh, that you believe, that you may believe into whom he have sent,'" or you believe into whom he have sent. So Yeshua is telling us the work of Yahweh is to believe in the one Yahweh has sent. We also learned that Deuteronomy, the great prophet Moshe, was telling us the same thing, believe in the one whom Yahweh has sent. So we see in times past, Yahweh has sent multiple people. In the time of the deliverance of Israel from the land of Egypt, he sent Moshe. And Moshe taught the laws, and he built a priesthood, and he was able to lead them in that way according to what Yahweh was teaching him. We see Noah built the ark, and he led the existing remnant at that time to safety. And it is also important to note that Noah, and that sign that was shown to him, the rainbow and so forth, was to show the completion of this plan in these last days, and Pastor has covered that. We've seen various judges in the Book of Judges all over the scriptures who led the children of Israel out of times of sin when they disobeyed Yahweh and didn't practice his laws. Prophets like Samuel and Jeremiah were also sent to guide the people, but they didn't listen. They didn't even listen to Yeshua Messiah. Let's look at Yachanan 8 verse 12. It is found on page 824. Yachanan 8 verse 12, it states, "Then Yeshua spoke again to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness." And it's important to note that darkness is the assemblies of the world. These are the churches. These are the different committees that come together, and they are not able to solve the problems in the world. They only create more problems in the world. But this is a very important point. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So the light of life, you can see here, are the laws of light. And for the notes, Psalms 119 verse 105, 130, 133, and Isaiah 8 verse 20 also talks about light. It means the laws of Yahweh. Now in Yachanan 9 verse 5 on the next page, as long as I am of the world, as long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So this is a very important point to make. Yeshua is not here at this time. In Psalms 110, it talks about how Yeshua will until the world is made into his footstool. Until the people are able to accept this message, Yeshua is not going to return. And this is going to be because of the work of Yisrael Hawkins, the last day's witness. But who is the light of this world at this time? Isaiah 49 verses 3 and 6. It is on page 561. It states, "And he said to me, You are my servant, O Yisrael, whom I will be glorified. And he said, Is it not enough that you shall be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the protected of Israel? I will also give you as a light to the Gentiles, so you may be my salvation to the ends of the earth." So Pastor is this light at this time, and he is teaching us his way, Yahweh's way of life. So in conclusion, I would like to stress and emphasize that Yahweh has sent his witness Israel to reestablish his house, and in these last days, to teach us to become teachers of righteousness, teachers of peace, also through the peaceful solution, exactly what Pastor has established in these last days. So with that, will you all please stand? And I'd like to introduce you to a great friend and a great deacon in Yahweh's house, the great Deacon Yaakov.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I want to spend a moment talking about a topic that's very easy as a sin that we can very easily fall into and not even realize it. And it has to do with our mouth. Because by our words we will be justified, or by our words we will be condemned. And with our mouth we can vow and break it. We can lie and we can gossip. These are all things that we can fall into that we will be found unworthy to enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. And I want to start in Leviticus. Let's start at the law. My title today is "We Must Think Before We Speak." We must think before we speak. Leviticus chapter 19 is where I want to start, and there's two laws in this one particular verse, but I'm going to talk about the first. And if you're not able to catch all the scriptures, just write them down so you can go back and read them later, because I got a lot to cover. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 16. It says, "You shall not go about talebearing or slandering among your people." You shall not go about talebearing or slandering among your people. Now, if you turn over to Proverbs, and if you have a tab there, great. If not, might want to put a bookmark in Proverbs, because I want to spend a lot of time there. But when we hear the word talebearer, what comes to mind is someone who goes around telling stories that aren't true, someone that's telling tales. But I want to read the scriptural definition of a talebearer, because we can be a talebearer and not even tell one lie. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 13. Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 13. A talebearer tells secrets. A talebearer tells secrets. That's the definition of a talebearer. Someone who tells secrets. All it takes is to hear a private matter and repeat it, and that we fall then into the category of a talebearer. Now, if you turn one page over to Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 23, a prudent, discerning, and careful man keeps quiet about what he knows. You know, this right here, we should remember Yeshua. When he was being accused, he remained silent. This is our example, to remain silent on these things. But the heart of a fool proclaims their foolishness. When we go about talking about things that we should not, we're only showing how much of a fool we are. It only shows how much self-control we lack when we're going around and not controlling, praise Yahweh, we're not controlling the things that we say. But if you go back to Proverbs chapter 10, I warned you, I do have a lot of scriptures. Make sure you write them all down. It's very important. Proverbs chapter 10. Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 19. In a multitude of careless words, sin is not lacking. That's why a wise man keeps quiet about what he knows, because he knows it's sin to go spreading it. So he who controls his tongue is wise. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The mind of the wicked has no value. Has no value to Yahweh. What Yahweh does not want anything to do with someone who can't control himself. Now in Jacob chapter 3. But remember, hold your place in Proverbs. Jacob chapter 3. And look at verse 5. In the same way, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. Behold how great a forest a little fire kindles. We can have this million-acre forest, but all it takes is one little spark to destroy the whole thing. And the tongue is like a fire, a world of iniquity. A world of iniquity, right there at the tip of our tongue. A world of iniquity. So the tongue is set among our members, defiling the whole body and destroying all creation. And for this is subject to the fire of Gehenna. And if it's not controlled, Yahweh isn't just going to cut our tongue out and let us enter in the kingdom. It defiles the whole body. It makes us completely unfit. Because what it shows is our character. It shows that we are lacking that self-control. But if we, going back now to Proverbs, back to Proverbs chapter 26. And in verse 20, remember what we just read in Jacob chapter 3 about the fire. About the fire. Proverbs chapter 26 and verse 20. Where there is no wood, the fire goes out. Once that forest is done burning, there's no more fire. It goes out. Where there is no talebearer, the quarreling stops. The quarrel stops. Now, if you remember in Proverbs chapter 6, the 6 things that Yahweh hates and 7 are abomination. Did you figure that out yet? Well, the 7th is part of the 6th. The 6th thing that's listed is a false witness who speaks lies. And the 7th is one who sows discord among brothers. Now, it's part of it. Part of the false witness. But the one who sows discord is one who goes speaking about things they should not. They sow discord because it actually, I'll get to that in a moment. It causes lots of problems, but it causes discord among brothers. And if you go, and looking back in verse 22 here, in chapter 26, Proverbs 26, verse 22, where the words of a talebearer are like wombs. They go down into the innermost parts of the body. If you talk to somebody who has been, gossiped about and their business is spread everywhere, they'll describe to you a pain in their chest that they actually feel. It's an emotional pain that you can feel it in your chest. And Proverbs explains it perfectly. And there's another place in Proverbs 18, I believe it was, yes, in Proverbs 18 verse 8. It describes it again. But it's actually a pain. This is what sows the discord. This is the quarreling. It causes the quarrel. Now, remember, There's plenty of examples in the scriptures about how a death actually took place because of gossip. Gossip, I want to read from the Respect Unit, Peaceful Solution Respect Unit, page 168. It says, gossiping is to spread false accusations, rumors, or even facts about others. Yes, telling something that is true about someone without that person's consent is gossiping. And it says, the only time it is acceptable to repeat a private matter is if you are told it is okay. Anything other than this is gossiping. So gossiping is to spread false accusations, rumors, or facts about others. Remember, Yeshua was killed on false accusations. That was gossiping. He was killed based on gossip. There's other examples also. But another example, in Matthew chapter 11. They called Yeshua a few other things here. In Matthew chapter 11, it says in verse 19, Matthew 11, verse 19, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, behold, a gluttonous man and winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. A friend of publicans and sinners. Now, why would they say he was a friend of sinners? Remember, you just heard about Nora a minute ago. Remember when she was accused in Yochanan chapter 8. Yochanan chapter 8, 1 through 11. Remember, they came and accused her. This woman's been caught in adultery. Well, she was guilty of the act, but she wasn't taught. She was never taught right from wrong. So how could she be held accountable for it? Yeshua went and taught her after this and said, go and sin no more. Do you remember what she did, which we just heard, when she was at the well? Remember what she did when Yeshua got done speaking with her? She went gossiping. She went gossiping. Righteous gossip. She went and started upbuilding the house of Yahweh. Turn over to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4. In verse 29, there is right gossip and there's wrong gossip. I don't want to get anybody down feeling bad about themselves. I know we all fall into this. Without a thought, we let a word slip out of our mouth and then we fall guilty of it. In Ephesians 4, verse 29, it says, let no corrupt communication, foul language, or evil word, the gossip, the talebearing, the slandering, all falls under this. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is righteous for the necessary upbuilding of the house of Yahweh. That's what Nora did. She went and started upbuilding the house of Yahweh, teaching and spreading the message. Hey, I found this man. This man was sent by Yahweh. This is the things that we should be saying. For the necessary upbuilding of the house of Yahweh, that it may minister blessings to the hearers. Blessings, not cursings. Listening to these only brings cursings. In Deuteronomy, what is necessary for the upbuilding of the house of Yahweh? Deuteronomy chapter 6. It says in verse 6, and these laws which I command you this day must be in your heart. And I'm speaking about one right now. These laws must be in our hearts. And you must teach them diligently to your children and talk about them. And talk about them, these things. The scripture, if you want to talk about a particular person, pick a prophet, pick an apostle. Praise Yahweh. Pick the last day's witness in the work that he's doing in these last days. And talk about them. When you sit in your house, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, when you rise up, when you go to work, wherever you are. These things right here. This book right here. I want to give you a couple things to remember here in a moment. I just don't want to get ahead of myself. So back to Proverbs chapter 30. Proverbs chapter 30. In verse 32. If you have done foolishly and exalted yourself, now we can do this in our minds. We can easily build ourselves up in our minds. Or if you have an evil thought and you want to speak it, you want to talk about it, place your hands over your mouth. Place your hands over your mouth. This is right here is a way to keep the law, because as long as you have your hands out of your mouth, you can't. What'd I say? You don't know. Place your hands over your mouth. And if someone wants to come and, hey, have you heard? What you can do is you can tell them what was told to Daniel, shut up and go your way. Don't listen to it. I want to go back to the peaceful solution. Peaceful solution, page 168. This is the respect unit. To avoid damaging reputation. Now, this is an easy way to damage a reputation, because once somebody does this, you remember it, and it damages that person's reputation. And to avoid damaging someone's reputation, ultimately your own, think about everything before it comes out of your mouth, especially if it concerns someone else. Before you speak, stop and ask yourself, is what I'm about to say likely to damage someone's reputation? Is it gossip or false accusation? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, then what you have to say is not worth repeating or mentioning. Find something else to talk about that could help build that person's reputation. The law and the prophets. This is what builds our reputation. Well, that's all I need from there. But we must think before we speak. Now, I want to give you a couple things to remember. This is prohibitive law number 301. Prohibitive law number 301. Every time you go to the cafeteria and order a meal, you order a 301A or a 301B, remember, do not gossip. Do not talebear. Do not slander. Okay? Every time you go to the cafeteria, you should remember this. Make it an order. Another thing I want to remind us on is to decide whether or not we should talk about it. Yahweh is without sin. Yahweh does not sin. And so think about, it's impossible for him to sin. So if Yahweh talks about it, talk about it. If Yahweh doesn't talk about it, don't talk about it. Plain and simple, rule of thumb, as long as we follow these things, we will be able to enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. We will be able to bridle our tongue. I want to be in the kingdom of Yahweh, and I want to see all of you there too. And that's why I wanted to bring this message today, so that we can't fall in this, because it's easy. It's so easy to fall into it. But I know if we put this into practice and focus hard and don't fall into this trap, we will be one step closer into entering into the great kingdom of Yahweh. May Yahweh bless you in your understanding. At this time, I'd like to turn over to the great Kahan, Kenanya Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, saints of Yahweh. You may be seated. Praise Yahweh for the wonderful teachers that are being brought up in the house of Yahweh in these last days. All right. Is everybody ready for the kingdom? Do you desire the kingdom? All right. Praise Yahweh. I know, that say you're ready for the kingdom. Well, I still got a few things to overcome, so I don't know if I'm quite ready to go in. But we desire the kingdom, right? Remember the vow we made when we got our ear all? Do you love the house of Yahweh more than all else? Everybody remember that? And we said to the priests, the Kohanas, that yes, we do. We said before Yahweh, yes, we do love the house of Yahweh more than all else. So we've got to have our minds set on this kingdom above anything else that we set before our minds in these last days. Now, one thing that we have to consider that those who came before us didn't have to consider is, or not consider, but deal with, are the huge amount of distractions that have come up since the increase of technology in 1934. Now, Yahweh prophesied that this would take place. Daniel showed it in Daniel that there would be an increase in technical knowledge and so forth. And Yahweh has used this knowledge also to bring forth this message, but Satan has done it to actually block people's minds from hearing the truth, as a tool to block people's minds from hearing the truth. If you turn over to Genesis chapter 2 and look at verse 9, it says, "And out of the ground Yahweh made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight and desirable for food. The tree of life was in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of righteousness and evil was in the midst also." So we have the history of this. We know the trees, the two works that were brought up from the very beginning. And of course, this has carried all the way down to this last days, where there still is only two trees. We got some information about the two witnesses, the kings of the east, the 10 kings, We have the Roman Catholic Church in this time period, which that's just a different name, but the same group of people, the same teachings that started with Cain and a system that was created through Nimrod. We have all these things and all these different organizations and daughters that the prophecies talks about coming forth from this one woman who rejected Yahweh under the influence of Satan and started this mixture, this system of righteousness and evil, which brought people to the point where they became evil like the gods. And then on the other hand, we have this tree of life, which brings forth the perfect 613 laws of Yahweh, that if a man and a woman would live by them, would agree to uphold them as they are taught in the house of Yahweh or from the house of Yahweh, from Yahweh's priests, then they will have life. And that's the promise of Yahweh. Now, if you look over to chapter 3, in verse 1, it says, "Now the serpent was more subtle and crafty than any beast of the field, which Yahweh had made. And she said to the woman, Has Yahweh indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" You know, is that really true? Is that necessary? I mean, look at all these beautiful trees here. That one over there, it's got shiny glass. That one over there is a beautiful color. You know, this one is saying something that really kind of fits your schedule. All these different trees there. Yahweh had these organizations that were out there, but Yahweh had told Adam and Eve to only receive your instructions, your teaching from one tree, and that's the tree of life. And this is something that Eve knew. She knew this, and she said, no, Yahweh has said, only partake of this tree, otherwise we'll die if we go outside of this garden, this way of life that Yahweh has established. And so Satan comes back with a little bit of subtlety, and she says, oh, no, listen, he knows that you will not surely die. Surely you're not going to, look, I've been eating pork for the last 50 years. I mean, and I'm still alive. I'm not dead, right? I mean, I've been breaking the Sabbath. I don't care. Wednesday is my day off. So that's when I keep my Sabbath, and I'm still alive, And Eve got to thinking, she's got to considering, this person's got a point. They're still alive. They were told we would die, but no, they're not dead. And she started considering, and this was not an instant thing that took place. This was over a period of time, right? And after some much continual persuasion, Eve finally went and partook of another way of life. And she started at that process, this death that Yahweh said would come if you partake of these fruits. Well, look at verse 5. He says, "For he knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open, and you will be as the gods, knowing righteousness and evil." Now, of course, at this point of time, we should understand that it's not just a matter of something that we just know or something that's just in our mind, because most of us, except for our children who've been born in the house of Yahweh now, we came out of sin. We came out of evil. We know the things that the world has to offer. We know, we've experienced, and even some of us even practice those things ourselves. But it's not merely knowing as to be aware of something, righteousness and evil, that makes a person evil. It is the actual taking that knowledge and putting it into practice in your life that makes you evil like the gods. And this is what Eve started to do. She started to teach this amongst other people as well. And of course, this unrighteous gossip started to spread, and we see the deterioration of mankind that came in through sin. You had all this time period where mankind was living. They were alive 900, 800, 700 years. They were still young, having children at, 600, 700 years old and so forth. You're considered old if you wait until your 30s or 40s now to have a child. They were barely just getting started at that time. But as the sin crept in and the laws of Yahweh started to be ignored, then what mankind doesn't understand, and I'm so thankful that we have a wonderful teacher to explain these things to us, unlike anybody else could ever. I've never heard this in any of Christianity ever, about the, praise Yahweh, the microorganisms and how Yahweh created these things, and how they work with mankind and his body. And the laws of Yahweh are there to govern the microorganisms. The laws of Yahweh are there to govern the decisions that we make, because we have an influence on how the microorganisms are able to do their jobs. Now, if we step out of line, like Pastor brought out about the, I believe it was the the dolphins and the HPV that they're having, that's not it. It's been a lot of things in the sea. Now, that you didn't see this 30, 40 years ago, but it shows how great the sin of mankind is growing. The sea coral, we brought reports on that, on how the coral reefs the scientists have found herpes in the coral reef. Well, we know, you don't take a rocket scientist to know that coral reef and dolphins and other animals or mammals or fish, sea life of the sea, can't break a law that brings that curse within themselves. So the influence is coming from mankind, not just the things that we see, but the actions that come forth from mankind that is bringing the strength of the nations down. And if you remember, one of the prophets said that there's a power surrounding your land, and it's bringing your strength down. Well, they had the strength, that strength which came from Yahweh's 613 laws, but of course they didn't want that. They wanted to have a king. They wanted to be like all the other nations. And Yahweh warned them before they left Egypt not to go after the gods, not to go after the nations that you're going into, certain ones that were going to be pushed out of the way, so that that bloodline, that genealogy could be prepared, and Yeshua would have his ancestors would have a clean breeding ground and a place for teaching. But they did, and Moshe prophesied that, once I die, I know you're a stiff-necked, stubborn, and rebellious nation, and you're going to go right back into these very things that you should have came out of when you left Egypt. But Egypt was still in their hearts. Egypt was still in their minds. They didn't let it go, and this is one of the greatest things that we have to consider when wanting to overcome sin, a bad habit, anything, is we have to change our mind. We have to change our thought process in order to change the actions. Because the mind, the body, they say the mind is willing, but the flesh is weak, or something like that. I can't remember how the statement goes. The mind is extremely, one of the most powerful tools that Yahweh has given you. Now, if you take that mind, that tool, and feed it with righteousness, if you put the golden oil that is being poured out from the lamp, the seventh lamp that is ordained, the only one ordained and prophesied to pour out this golden oil into your mind, take it unto yourself. One of the words it uses, imbibe, and to take it in, like to drink, to take it in, and it becomes a part of you, then you will start to produce the righteous fruits as well. I want you to, let's see here, I'll back this out here. I want you to take a look at some of these things right here. And all my peaceful solution, or all our peaceful solution, not mine, you don't belong to me. Students, can you tell me what, I don't know if you can see that, what these things would fall under a classification of that you're looking at right there? Everybody see that? What would those things fall under a classification of? What type of... when you look at that, what do you see those could be? Influences. That's right, influences. And what two categories can these influences fall under? Positive or negative? Are you awake, men? I'm not hearing anything over here. Come on now. What two influences? What two categories? All right, praise Yahweh. Gonna have the women outdo you again. Praise Yahweh. So positive and negative influences. Now, the thing that I wanted to say, I point out here, I don't want to go too deep in there, because this is, is this a bash technology sermon? No, it's not a bash technology sermon. The House of Yahweh uses these things. Your friends could be a great influence to you. You can talk about these things with your friends when you walk on the road, and when you sit down, and when you rise up and lie down, and when you're meeting with your friends and so forth in the work of Yahweh, where these things should be talked about. It shouldn't be any hanging out and goofing off. It should be all toward the building of the mind, your mind and heart toward the kingdom of Yahweh, like Yeshua said, praise Yahweh, in 6:33 of Matithia. That's what a true friend is. If you are with a friend and they want to show you something on their phone or on their computer or on their laptop that you would not be willing to sit there in front of your parents or the priest or the Kohanas or the one sent through Yahweh and look at right there with them, then it's more than likely something that you should not be looking at. Right? Now, at this point of time, we shouldn't have to go too deep into recognizing the different influences that are set before us, because if you let's see here, turn over to Yachanan Mark chapter 4 verse 18, because one thing I just kind of want to point out is the fact that Satan can use these things just like Yahweh has used them to build his house and build his work. She uses them as a distraction to the people, whereas Yahweh uses them as tools to build the minds of the people. And Yeshua wrote a parable here of the sower in chapter 4 in Yachanan Mark chapter 4, and we'll look at verse 18 and 19. It's on page 763. And he said, "And these are the ones who are sown among the thorns. They hear the word, that is the law and the prophets, but the cares, the anxieties and distractions," the cares, the anxiety, I gotta have this, I gotta do that, I want this, I need this, I gotta have you, I gotta. They distract the person from the goal that Yahweh set before him to begin with, which was, in Genesis, I'm going to make mankind in my image and likeness. And then Yeshua, he shows all the way through his plan and the prophets how he was going to do it. And Yeshua reiterated that by reminding the people, listen, this is where you need to have your heart and mind set, toward the kingdom. Because the kingdom is forever. Everything else is dying. You know, it's going to perish, but the laws of Yahweh that is being built up in our minds, the character of Yahweh, which is what the laws of Yahweh will produce in us, that's going to be forever. And that's what we should be desiring. But these cares, these anxieties and distractions of the world, or the deceitfulness or attractiveness of riches, or anything that falls underneath that category, or the lust for other things begin to creep in and choke the word that is the law and the prophets, and it becomes unfruitful, or that person becomes unfruitful in the keeping of the laws of Yahweh. Now, again, remember the subtlety of Satan. Let's look over to well, we won't go there, but in the second book of Yisrayl, chapter 17, verses 61 and 67, and this is a sermon from 1993, pastor says, he says, in 61, you think, boy, if I get this show, it will really make me happy. Well, it probably will. It will probably make you happy to sit there, waste your time over and over. I keep harping on this because I hear there are a lot of young people who are wasting their time with this. They can't even get their lessons in school done because of this. That is, time-wasting activities. This will also keep you out of the kingdom unless you start to resist and govern your life. Parents can't govern your life completely, although sometimes we would like to. We shouldn't. We should let you do some thinking on your own, but remember what I'm saying. The knowledge that you have here is what Yahweh says will bring you out of the things that deceived Eve, that she fell under deception of, which we have more at this time. So knowing this, we should be on guard. We should set our minds in advance and know that the deceptions and the pleasure-seeking and the distractions are much greater than they were in the days of our forefathers, and be on guard not to fall victim to these traps that Satan sets before us. Remember, the righteous man, he sees danger and he turns the other way. But he says here, we have more at this time, greater than Eve, and you can go ahead and partake of and become evil like the gods if that's what you want to be. But of course, we have the knowledge of Yahweh in these last days to keep us from going the way of Satan. And Pastor, if you just write down for your notes, because of course I've run out of time, in the 9th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapters 29, verses 27 through 29, he talks about how we should set our minds in advance and gird up our loins with the laws of Yahweh. In the 7th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 22, verses 95, 96, and 98, he talks about building your mind. And of course, in the 11th book of Yisrayl, part 2, chapter 11, verse 26, he says that the foundation of the prophets and the apostles is the very thing to educate you Build your mind to the point where you won't be making these mistakes, where you won't be bringing down your food supply that nourishes your body and your brain, so you won't be making these mistakes that the world is making at this time, so you won't follow another domino that's fallen in front of you or about to fall or tilting. And in effect, we will put an end to sin, but we've got to start with ourselves, stopping sin within our own lives, and becoming that righteous example to our fellow man and to our friends, and training for this great kingdom that Yahweh has set before us, because it is forever. But remember what we need and what we're training for. It's not just to have eternal life, it's to be teachers. So may Yahweh bless your understanding. You'll all please stand. Turn it over to the Great Khan Kifa.
Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. It's always a great honor to be able to address the called out ones, and it's a privilege that I look forward to forever, because I do realize that this is the greatest group of people on the face of the earth, right here, right now, in the house of Yahweh, and we're going to get into that in this sermon. The title is "Consider Yahshua and Trust in Yahweh to the End." And, last week, Pastor did, what he always does. he says something that just keeps replaying over and over and over in my head, and I attribute things like that to saving my life, because it's that information that he gives us that can actually, is capable of doing that. But something that he had mentioned about the 6,000-year plan and the two trees, Plans take time. Plans take time. And the plan to make mankind into the image and likeness of Yahweh, he said, began with the teaching of these two trees. You remember him saying that? Remember the two trees, because today what we're witnessing is actually a full maturing of these two trees. I would ask anybody a question. Have you ever watched a tree grow? I actually saw a hand go. But it's not an action sport. When you're watching a tree, you don't actually see it growing, but it's growing, isn't it? But meanwhile, while you're caught up in your daily life, going on, getting caught up with whatever it is that you do, weeks, months, years go by, and you do notice that the tree grew a little bit. Especially if it's somewhere where you're seeing it all the time. Well, if you had a camera with a time lapse, you could actually see that. And I bring up that point because we have that. We have that right here in the Book of Yahweh, is that time lapse where we actually see the beginning all the way to the end, prophesied. And we've actually seen these things coming to pass. These trees growing. And I bring this up just not to make an analogy. If you turn to page 515 in your Book of Yahweh, it's extremely important that we get this. Page 515, that's Proverbs 29, and I'm going to look at verse 18 real quick. Where there is no prophetic vision, the people perish. Okay, so if you understand where I'm going with this, where there's no prophetic vision, the people perish. You have to be aware of what's going on. Like the old, saying, you can't see the forest because all the trees that are in the way. Well, that's how we get sometimes. And we neglect to realize where we're at and what's truly going on, because, there's a lot of things to be excited about. If you turn over to page 696 in your Book of Yahweh, there's a lot of things that is going on right now, prophecies that are being fulfilled, but if you're not paying attention to them, you're not going to notice them. All right? You're not going to notice them. In Amosia 3, and if you look at verse 9, He says, publish it in the places of Ashdod and in the places in the land of Egypt, and say, assemble yourselves on the mountains of Samaria, and behold the great tumults. You know, what do you see in the world today? You see this very thing. Behold the great tumults within her, and the oppression that is in her midst. Pastors talked about this oppression recently. You know, and this is important. You know, this next part is very important because it shows you what's taking place, but then it shows you why it's taking place. All right, because they do not know to do righteousness, says Yahweh. So don't get caught up in the skirmishes in this world between one group and another. You know, there's strong pulls to get people involved in these arguments back and forth. You know, praise Yahweh. Is it, you know, do black lives matter or do white lives matter? Maybe it's the brown lives that matter. Whose life matters? Is it the police officer's life that matters or the one who's getting pulled over? They all don't know how to do righteousness, and that's the problem. It's not the color of their skin. You know, I hate to see people get caught up in all these things because I could see it's a trap from Satan. You know, it's a trap from Satan to divide people. As long as people are divided and they're hating each other, you can't get across to them anything. There's no information. It's that root of bitterness that Yahweh warns us about, right? So, you know, I would encourage everybody, please don't get caught up into, you know, presidential races and things like this other than how it relates to prophecy. Remember, our kingdom has nothing to do with this world. You know, we're looking forward to something much greater than, you know, this divided house that we see clearly, you know. But Yahweh does tell us to watch because in seeing prophecy come to pass, we are reassured of the plan of Yahweh. You know, we're reassured of the plan of Yahweh for mankind, which we are the finishing touch. We're the finishing touch of this plan. You know, Pastor Yisrayl Abel Hawkins is the seventh Malach. If you look at the lampstand, you'll notice there's not an eighth. There's not a ninth. This isn't a Hanukkah thing. You know, there's only 7 works, and we're in it. You know, this is where we're at right now. So, you know, we need, that's what needs to be the focus of our daily lives, not the skirmishes, not the tumults, you know, outside of how they relate to prophecy. Because if you remember in Zechariah 4 verse 9, you know, you can rely on these scriptures. But in Zechariah 4 verse 9, he says, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, and his hands will finish it. All right, this is it. You know, and when we see the prophecies like so many of our speakers brought forth today, I thought this was so awesome. You know, with these 10 kings, I remember watching this unfold, and I was bouncing off the walls, you know, like seeing what's actually taking place before my eyes. Because, you know, as pastors brought out, as the House of Yahweh is always taught, you know, we go back and we read the mark of the beast, or you go to the Yisrael Says program, and you can punch in 10 kings. Don't put the number 10, but spell it out, T-E-N. And you'll see how many times, you know, this subject has been brought out. But you'll see that it is specifically relating to the time period of the end. All right? So when we see these things take place, we really need to understand where we're at. You know, Satan's got all kinds of things to distract us with. All kinds of things that can distract us. You know, the games, the lust for wealth and riches, you know, trying to be one up above somebody else, you know. Maybe I need to get a truck that's got, you know, 92-inch rims that I need an extension ladder to get up to. You know, it's like all these toys that you know, people get caught up in this, you know, seeking after. You know, there's no greater prize that a person can seek after than to be able to conduct themselves righteously and to keep Yahweh's laws in all circumstances. You know, that's it. That should be our number one goal, to be in unity with Yahweh here at His house, and to be ready and willing to do the work that He's called us here to do. You know, because He didn't call us here for strife. We see that in the world. And, you know, I mentioned about the trees earlier because to me that made so much sense. You know, I've been here 20 years now. a lot of the speakers that were speaking today weren't yet born. Some of them were little. And, I had the privilege of watching these young men grow and watching the house grow to the point where, I could, rest assured, had any of them speaking to anybody, anywhere, without the slightest doubt that they were going to do exactly what Yahweh wanted them to do. But this is all Yahweh's doing, and it's marvelous when we can behold it. But of course, if we're going to get caught up in all the arguments and bickering, remember that we were called here for a work, right? And we should all know what that work is, because Yahweh called us here to be teachers, to be leaders, as one of the young men was talking about today. All right, so leaders, it's very important that we understand what a leader is, because a leader is somebody that follows instructions. All right, a leader doesn't disregard instructions. A leader follows the instructions of the supervisor. If you don't think I'm right, consider our high priest. Look to Yeshua Messiah. All right, is there anything that he did contrary to what Yahweh had told him to do? Not a thing, right? And then you look at our overseer, Yisrayl Abel Hawkins. Is there anything that he has done that is contrary to what Yahweh said that he would do and what Yahweh wants him to do? No, right? So those are our examples. Those are our examples. So every time we get in these situations where, we want to buck up and speak out and, remember that, because the leaders need to be strong. Leaders need to be strong even when they themselves are under pressure. And this particular point hit me like a ton of bricks this week because, I was in one of those moments. One of those moments where it seems like nothing's going right. Nothing ever goes right. Why? How come? Why me? All those thoughts, running through your head. Why can't this be more simple? What's wrong? And I was stooping in my misery there for a little bit, and it just seemed like one after another, scripture after scripture, kept coming to my mind, and it was really a great experience, because not only did I realize the error of my way in my thinking, but I was able to see something, that I didn't really realize before. If you turn to Hebrews, and this is concerning, our high priest, in that, Christianity does a great evil in portraying Yeshua Messiah. They don't get his name right or anything. But the whole idea that this was some kind of person who didn't experience any kind of trouble, he just kind of floated around and, he did this a lot and just always cheerful and, that's not necessarily how the scriptures show. He said that he was a man associated with grief and sorrow. A man that tried with every breath of his life to get people to understand and was rejected by men. All right, but look at Hebrews 4 and verse 15. He says, "For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all ways tempted, just as we are. Yet he was without sin." So he showed that it can be done. All right? So that should show us. Remember, he's the forerunner. He's the one who laid the groundwork for us to be able to do what we need to do. We need to get there too. We need to be strong, even in moments where we're under pressure. People still rely on us, even though we could be having a bad day. If you think of how many prayers Pastor answers in a day, I don't even know if that could be counted. Maybe, maybe someday. But how many times in a day is he always on call, always doing something to help other people, whether things are going great or bad for him? And we look to Yeshua Messiah, who even being severely beaten, tormented all throughout the night, his mindset was still on others. His mindset was, you make sure this is done, make sure that's done. If you remember when Pastor was arrested, he knew that he was going to be arrested. And what did he do? He left us with a set of instructions on what to bring him when he gets there and to make sure that he has all his things? No. He left us with instructions on how to make sure the House of Yahweh could keep functioning while he was away. And that is the goal that we should be seeking every day. Remember that and dealing with each other, because we know it gets hard and it's hot and things go wrong and things always go wrong. And this doesn't always fix the problem. It doesn't always fix the problem to know this. But without that prophetic vision, without seeing where we're going, you're going to fall. You understand that the deception in this time period is greater than ever in the history of mankind. All right? And Satan would love for you to get your mind off of this goal. But we, the House of Yahweh, will not allow it. And it's been a blessing today to be able to see all the great teachers that are ready to fulfill that office here in the House of Yahweh. So with that, if you all please stand, it's my privilege to turn it over to one of the great sons of Israel, Abel, for closing prayer.